Hey,
Hi, gorgeous. You look fabulous.
thank you. Did you notice my lip?
Ooh, pretty. Actually, well, ooh, all right. I have on the same thing.
Oh,
I
really?
I'm wearing
It
precious
looked,
too.
it looked when rolled it up, I thought it was gonna be more of like a dark magenta, like
Hmm.
ruby plum. And when I put it on, it had more of like a hot flare pink to it. So I was like, okay, come through, Ruby,
I
come
like it.
through.
Yes, ruby
So yes,
lipstick.
Ruby's going right next to my little work stash of lips in case I have to quickly turn on my camera. So I have a lip
Yes.
liner and lipstick.
Very nice. Woo,
Yes.
ruby. Awesome, awesome. So, thank you so much for agreeing to meet with me today and kind of talk about your journey. What I love about the way we work is that we never really chit chat like, oh, how is the weather? We kind of like jump right in. But just because I want everyone to know why I think you're such a dope human. So I want you to introduce yourself before I tell everyone what we're going to be talking about. And I want you to hold nothing back, all bragging rights. Tell everybody why you're the dopest woman ever.
Because I'm Crystal. No, I'm
Thank
joking.
you.
I'm Crystal. I am an HR professional by day, and by night, and kind of now with COVID, also during the day. A mom. I started a business, so an entrepreneur in the learning. Um, Child of God, so I volunteer at church, do things in the community, and I try to be a good friend and a daughter. So I don't know. I just feel like all those roles, just trying to do the best I can in each of them, trying to grow, whether it's at work, grow business, grow to the best mom I could be, grow in reference to, raising the best possible child that he can be. I just try to focus on that in all areas. And then I'm trying to work on my fitness routine because I'm
Yes,
getting a
yes.
summer body for 2021 on top of all of that.
So I felt a little shrinking when you started saying, I try to do this, I try to do that, because when it comes to friendship, there is no trying. Like you excel, you go above and beyond. You are just like everyone's cheerleader, everyone's encourager. I mean, we'll talk about up notes in a minute, but I feel like you're just one of these people who, regardless of what you go through, regardless of what's happening in life, regardless of pandemic, election, you just have this bright spark, this bright smile, you're a ray of sunshine, and you're just like one of the dopest people I meet. So I totally love
Oh,
you.
thank you. I mean, you know what? I feel like after so many like eyes, I think I just tend to be like, well, I think, and this is my soft way of softening it up to be like, I don't want you to think that arrogant or conceited. So it's like, well, I think, yeah. So, but no, it's a fair call out. Thank you. I will
No,
accept and receive my dopeness.
you are absolutely, yes, you are dope and confident. You have every right to brag all about it. So today I wanted to talk more about resilience because there's so much happening in the world as it relates to the pandemic, presidential elections that we've been watching, debates. COVID-19 in itself has either pushed us to become more resilient or, just figure out how to deal with life. So this resilience buzzword has just been floating around and I'm like, well, what is resilience anyways? I've seen it being defined as the ability to bounce back or the tendency to just, get your life back together. But what does that even look like? What is your definition of resilience?
Um, so I would say it has evolved over time because I think before 5 years ago. So let me take a step back. So 5 years ago, in the midst of identifying, going through a divorce, found out I was pregnant. Um, and then, now with, COVID, with social justice kind of coming to a peak in the country, I just feel like resilience has changed for me. Before, I think it was how do you quickly get back to where you were before, right? So if you fall off at peg B, you get back to peg B. Where I feel like now my definition is how do you get back, or not really get back, but how do you get through a difficult situation? Because when you go through a difficult situation, you're not going to be the same person. And so your outlook, your perspective, your goals might change. And so ultimately, I think you have to get back to a place where you can be who you feel you were called to be mentally, emotionally, physically,
Mm-hmm.
at the best possible peak for that season so that you can kind of go out and execute against whatever that purpose, whatever that passion, whatever that goal might be. So I think for me now it's more of resilience is how do I go through it, get the learnings, strengthen myself up, make sure that I have the energy and endurance to do what I need to do, so that I can go out and kind of keep running.
Yeah, I love that for so many reasons. One, I was actually talking to my client today and she was talking about like her self-care journey and some of the realizations that she's made. And how a lack of boundaries allowed other people to take advantage of her. And we talked through a lot of things, but at the end, I said to her, promise me one thing. This is going to make you better and it's not going to make you bitter. So I love the way how you define it, where you're like, it's not just about getting out of it or, hurrying up to end this season, but it's about going through it. And I know personally for me, whenever I'm in a situation that's uncomfortable or that I find painful, I want to get out as soon as possible, like end this chapter, let's move on, right? So I love for you where you're like, it's not just move on, move on, move through it. It's go through it, develop that resilience, find out what you're supposed to learn from it, what you're supposed to do with it, and just become that better person. So it's this process of evolving. I really like how you added that piece into it.
I think to your point of like get better, not bitter, which I do love. That's in one of my songs. Is that it requires a journey most times, because if you're trying to quickly get out of it, it's like almost kind of putting on a mask just so that for whether it's social media's sake or for air's sake that you appear to be back.
Yeah.
Or back and better than ever, best life, all those kind of hashtags are great. I think directionally I get the intent, but I think if you don't think about it as a journey, then you're so focused on the speed to get to a destination that's unknown that it doesn't really serve you. And it's almost kind of like wasted time. So I don't know if this was a kid's story or an adult movie, but something recently that I saw was don't let your pain be wasted. So pain from whatever the crisis might be, like you need to make it the best, because otherwise it was like, why did I go through all that?
Right. No, that's really good. I love that. So you kind of threw out there that you had a divorce. And again, one of the things I realized about you is you are big on joy. It's not so much happiness, right? So happiness is circumstantial, it's situational. Everything is perfect in my life, so I'm happy. Whereas joy is, it doesn't matter what's going on, because of what I know, because of who I know, I am going to get through it, right? So I know that God loves me. I know that God has a greater plan for me. So because of the joy, I can still smile. I can still rejoice. Does that mean everything is perfect? No, but it means that I have hope for a better future. Does that mean that I'm being phony? No, it means that I know something you don't know, right? So talk to me a little bit about the range of emotions that you experienced after your divorce and just how joy plays into just your personality. I think personality is a big part of it, where you're just naturally bubbly, and I love that. But talk to me about the different range of emotions that you went through and where you'd say you're in the process right now. So I threw a lot at you. One, I've seen 5 stages of grief, 7 stages of grief. I don't know how many stages it is, but talk to me about the different stages that exist, the different emotions, and where you are right now in your journey.
Okay, I might answer them out of order, but I'll answer them. So I would say emotions. Honestly, I feel like you ride the emotional roller coaster. So like you go from like shock, anger, frustration, upset, mad, rejection, loneliness, a loss. I think not just a loss from like the person or the relationship, but also a loss of like your dream of how you envision things. With me being pregnant at the time, the dream of how I was going to be pregnant, whether it's like, this party or that party, or even just raising kids, that, but then also loss of friends. So I would say there was a clear purging, I guess, probably not the best word, but a purging of friends, or the levels of access of those friends. At moments, I think there was probably even rage. There was regret. I think you start to get to probably even a place of fear of like unknown about the future. What does this mean for me? What does it mean for my son? Like all those kind of things. And then eventually, once you get, and to your point in stages, I'll get back to that. Once you get to acceptance, I think you then get to a place where you start to like, you're able to be more open to the possibilities, open to the opportunities of what it could become. So it's like, what's going to be my new norm? You're more optimistic. I think normally at the earlier stages of it, when you're in that shock and that anger, you have to kind of, to the point that we talked earlier, you have to actually go through them and not just be like, okay, I'm mad, I'm over it. Because it'll come right back and then you haven't really dealt with it. So I felt like for me, I thought I was like, check, okay, I'm done, saved, forgiven, I'm good. But then something would happen or a memory would come back and I would be like boiling red again. And I was like, Okay, so obviously I didn't address this the fullest way I needed to.
Right.
So I think it's okay and, normal to kind of flow back and forth between some of those. In reference to the grief stages, I've seen the grief stages for like the death. Which they do say a divorce is like a death because it's like open heart surgery because all of the, the memories, the connection that you have with someone that you're married to, it's kind of almost pulled apart instantaneously. And it's almost like, okay, flip the light switch. That doesn't matter anymore. I found another one that I like a little bit more. And so they have a few stages. So it's shock and denial, pain and guilt, anger and bargaining, depression, reflection and loneliness, upward turn, and then it's kind of like the reconstruction or, rebuilding or what you want to call it. I would say that it's been about 4.5, probably less than 4.5 years or whatnot, with the divorce. And so I would say year one was, I went through, I wouldn't say I got to reconstruction and probably not an upward turn, but the first kind of 4 or 5, I definitely got through in year one. I would say year two started to do more of the upward turn. How do you see this? And kind of really rescoping my outlook on the situation.
Right.
Started getting to more of the growth. Okay, well, what did you learn from this? What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about how you assess other people? What did you learn about friendships? So I would say now I'm definitely, I don't like the term reconstruction, but I'm in more of the, what is my new norm? So it's not really on the grief journey because I don't necessarily think I'm there. I think like anyone from a past experience, there's things or triggers that could come up that might remind you of, a situation, but I don't necessarily think I'm, on the pendulum back and forth anymore. So, yeah.
That's really amazing how you described everything. And I just want to thank you, first of all, for being so authentic and transparent about your journey. Because a lot of times when I read this, in terms of like stage 1 through stage 5 or 7 or whatever amount of stages that there are, it's always this linear process. So you start at 1 and then you move to 2, then you move to 5 or 7, right? But the way you describe it sounds so much more accurate in terms of a roller coaster, because it's not always you go from 1, 2, 3 and then you end at healing. Sometimes you do get back to a previous stage, or you feel like you went into the healing stage and then, like you said, something triggered it. So I think that was a really good point for you to mention that it can be a roller coaster. And a lot of times when I think about grief, whether it's from a marriage or a lost relationship or death, I do kind of equate it to this pandemic, like the corona coaster that we're on. So sometimes you're like, oh my God, I have so many opportunities from this crisis, and then sometimes you're like, this sucks. And then if you're me, you're like, what day is today again? Like getting all my days scrambled. But I really appreciate the way how you broke it down and you explained it. So for anyone who is, in a situation or going through something, they can understand that this new norm may be something that they're not only having to adjust to, but also you're creating a new norm on top of the new norm, right? So for example, like with the pandemic, the early stage was, okay, so we're on lockdown for 2 weeks. And you're like, all right, so my new norm is not that I'm on lockdown for 2 weeks, I'm on lockdown indefinitely. Then it's, okay, so the mask, the 6 feet, the social distancing. So I think that's a better depiction of real life, right? The roller coaster, the ups and downs, the ebbs and the flows. But you mentioned one word, acceptance, which is such a big word for me, because a lot of times I try to control outcomes or control circumstances. So for you to say, you get to this place of acceptance, or, just recalibrating, reconstructing, I really think that just shows how much work you've done on yourself and how mature you are as a person. One of the other things you mentioned is like your perspective and your outlook. And the question I would say is, what are some of the things that you had to unlearn? Or what are some of the thoughts you had to dismiss that no longer serve you?
Well, I would say the one thing that you just talked about was a big one, which is control. So not that I necessarily tried to control people or situations, but indirectly I did. But I didn't necessarily consciously say, I'm trying to control you.
Of course.
And then I was good. But I think that was a big one for me, where you don't really have control of anything. So for me with this pandemic, I haven't really had too many like roller coasters of emotions, because I'm like, oh, I didn't control any of this anyway. So let's just roll with it. We're going to be here the rest of the year. awesome, save mileage on my lease. Now I don't have to pay miles back. So
Right.
I think that's a big one. I think specifically related to, and maybe this is more for a minority community, but I feel like you're trained as a child to keep things in the house. So when things aren't good, you go out, oh, we're great, posting pictures, do. But
Yeah.
like at home, you're like arguing and crying. And so I feel like I probably should have brought in help sooner.
Okay.
So not necessarily thinking that I can kind of do it on my own, or even just help for myself, right? And how do I process emotions? How do I process what I think the expectation that something should be or shouldn't be, and how it is in reality?
Right.
Expectations lead me to kind of the third point of expectations kill everything. So just because whether it's, joy, your outlook, your perspective, the reality, enjoying the present, contentment, like all of that stuff, because you have something there, and when it doesn't, it's just an automatic like, well, I guess, like, should I? Which ultimately can lead to bitterness, resentment, all those things. So
Right.
I think the expectation thing was huge. I think the other thing specific more to, I think, divorce that I had to accept or learn is that divorce sometimes isn't rejection of you as an individual. It's a rejection of you might not be a fit for that person.
Right.
So what that person needs or wants isn't what you are or what you offer. And so it doesn't reduce what you offer. It doesn't reduce what you bring to the world. It doesn't reduce what you can provide. It just might not be a fit. So it's kind of like the circle and the square. So trying to squeeze a circle in a square peg or a round hole, whatever you want to call it. I think that also was kind of a clarity point for me, because I took it so black and white of, okay, you say this means this. You say that or you do that, it means this, versus, okay, well, you can say that. That's how you feel, right? So it's kind of back to the like hurt people, right? So if someone does something to you, it may not necessarily really have to do anything with you. It has probably more to do with the other person, right? So just kind of keeping some of those things in mind were like ahas and learnings. I think the other thing that kind of came out of it was I am more self-aware now, because going through counseling, I sometimes call myself, and my counselor will roll her eyes and laugh at me, but that I'm a counselor, just not with the certifications and the degrees. Because
Absolutely.
things I'm like, that sounds like codependency. What do you think about that? Or how do you really feel? No, let's sit in the emotion right now.
Right.
So I feel like, and it's not something unlearned, but I hadn't really gone through traditional repeated weekly, biweekly, whatever, monthly counseling until this situation came up. And just to be able to see the value of that, brought out other topics that I didn't necessarily know had an impact or influence on my life at the time. So those are ones I can think of now. They're probably
Oh my gosh. Those were so many gems that you dropped right there. Like when you talk about getting help and talking to people, a lot of us feel either shame or whatever emotion it is why we feel like we need to hide what we're going through. I just really wish that people will hear that and say it's okay to talk to someone, find a trusted friend. Like, I know I owe you some money. Like, I have used you as a counselor, a listening ear, a confidant, a sounding board. So I know you have a big tab and a check for that I owe you, but I really do think that it's so therapeutic to talk to someone, to get someone else's perspective. And all these gems that you dropped about these disruptions in your life, it's not a rejection, it's not a reflection on you. And it's in any case, it's not only about divorce, it's not only miscarriages. It could be someone who lost their job, it could be someone who got fired from their job, whether wrongly or justifiably. But a lot of times we attach these things and we make these connections and we personify them and we carry that weight. So anyone who is facing a disruption or went through a disruption, I just want to highlight that it's not a personal reflection on your worth. So I really love that you said that. When you were joking around about the pandemic saving you time on your lease, miles on your lease, it actually brought me back to a situation that we had discussed. So I don't know if you remember, one day you came to my house, I left something in your car, you drove all the way to my house to drop it off, but on your way home, you got a flat tire. And for me, I noticed that I make a lot of connections that probably don't really connect. So in my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I didn't live this, then she wouldn't have to come, then she wouldn't have the flat car. But you were just so chill about it. Like I got so worked up about it because I took personal responsibility for what happened to your car. Whereas for you, you're like, it's a thing. I'm not attached to things, everyone is safe, we're okay, right? So I just love your perspective, and that's why I really wanted to just share you with the world for everyone to see. you know our perspective really changes the way we respond to situations and how we deal with life. With that said, I wanted you to talk more about, there's a saying, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. And I feel like there is so much that you have done to bottle it up and not necessarily sell it, but to give back to the world. So one of the things that I love that you brought to the world is Up Notes. So if you could just share, what is Up Notes? How did that come to life, and what are your future goals for Up Notes?
Sure. So, one thing, let me just back up to your lemon and lemonade thing, and it kind of goes in line with mindset and perspective. Growing up, I thought turn lemon into lemonade means, okay, well, if you don't like something, find the silver lining, or like
Mm-hmm.
try to make the best of it, right? Where from this situation, that statement actually has a different meaning. It's more of maybe you were planning to do, a lemon activity, or you just like to eat lemons. And now you're going to add some sugar and have lemonade. So it's actually a mindset shift to say, this is my new North Star. And so when you have the mindset shift to say, this is my new North Star, you're not necessarily having comparison or looking backwards to see about the old state. So for me, I think through this process, through this journey, it's been very, eye-opening to think about, like, where am I now going? What's my new norm versus comparing or thinking about an old life, or what I thought it was going to be, or what it should have been, or things like that. And I think to your point of crisis, everyone probably also has that too, whether it's, a time to get married, a time to have kids, a time for a promotion, a time to retire, a time to start a business, write a book, like whatever it might be. We all have these kind of preconceived notions of how it's supposed to be. And then when kind of inset, crisis, pandemic, whatever, it kind of pushes those things off, and you have to kind of reassess. And so net your new North Star. So Up Notes is a business that I birthed about 2 years ago. So it's oh, I actually have them here. This is like literally not playing. I had this from something else, but just haven't put them back downstairs. But so Up Notes is pre-printed Post-it notes based off of different themes. So right now I have themes for every day for kids that parents can, send inspiration, send love, send encouragement to their kids every day. I have test day Up Notes where it's encouragement for test days, quizzes, whatever it might be, tryouts, auditions, things like that. And then I have general Up Notes that you can leave for family members around the house. I have a second batch that needs to come to fruition or manifestation in the world, which are ones for pregnancy. So women who are going through pregnancy, there's weekly affirmations and prayers that you can say based off of what's happening at that stage. Mm-hmm. And then I have ones for divorce. So different scriptures that can kind of help you through that. So some of the other topics that I have are more scripture based. So it's confessions. And so the whole concept with Up Notes is really, see it, speak it, believe it. I'm a big, proponent that you start to change your outlook, your perspective, your mindset based off of how you're thinking and what you're saying. And so Up Notes is really geared around connecting the mind and the mouth to say the right things. And so honestly, we were at a conference, a group of friends, and we were talking about like business ideas. And I've never really been the type that was like, oh, I'm going to do this business, I'm going to do that business. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to get in there, we're going to have a business too. And so honestly, I went to Papados. Sorry, random note, but I love those. That place, we were in Atlanta, and I left something in the car. So I went back to the car, and literally it just like popped into my spirit. So I was like, this must be from God. Okay, let's roll with it. So I'm the type of person where I would write scriptures and notes around the house anyway. So it was funny, like people saw it and then they started kind of doing it in their home too. And I was like, oh, I guess this is a good idea. I don't know, but great. But like I would write on my my milk bags for my son when you're like pumping, I would be like, you can do it. You got enough milk. You got, you know. So when you open it or you see the note, it just brings a smile to your face. It's a reminder of who you are, a reminder of like whatever it might be. And so I was like, oh, well, people should do this all the time. So how do I make it easier for other people, right? So that's how Notes was birthed. And yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Is there anything else in the pipeline or nothing that nothing you can share yet?
I mean, there's some things I need to do, some more business development planning on the side, but I have a second project right now. I just call it Push to Peace. And so it's geared towards helping women and friends figure out how do they move through this journey of divorce. And, you know, what are the different stages that they might feel, how to assess where they are, what types of tools can help them based off of the stages that they are. And if you're a friend, you could potentially use the site too to say, hey, this is where I think my friend might be based off of what they're saying or what I'm hearing them say. How can I provide support? How can I provide encouragement? I think a lot of times people, whether it's death, whether it's divorce, whatever, don't really know what to say, job loss. And they're like, oh, more fish in the sea. Oh, you'll get better. Oh, they're in a better place. Like all these things that don't necessarily really help.
Yeah.
But they mean well. So it's trying to provide the person the help that they need, because a lot of times when you need the help, it's in the middle of the night. You can't necessarily call every single friend based off of their situation, or you can't call a counselor because you don't have the money or whatever the case may be. And for friends, again, just kind of that support. So working to get that to fruition and stop dragging my feet on that one. But yeah.
I think that's beautiful. I believe that as people, we're brands, and a lot of times we produce what we lack, right? So for me, I know when I recently became a wife, and then like 11 months later, I became a mom, and then 2 years later, I became a mom of 2 kids. I'm like, wait, hold up. So is my time just going to be being a wife and a mom? Like what happens to all my other dreams? So for me, that's kind of how I got into productivity coaching, where I'm like, am I the only woman who feels like there's not enough time? Like raise your hand if you feel like you need more than 24 hours in the day. So I feel like for you, it's when you were going through your story, or when you were going through your situation, and I would say your evolving story, you would have loved to have Push to Peace. You would have loved to have Up Notes. And because it wasn't there for you, or because you weren't able to find it in something that resonated with you or that you could relate to, you created it. So I just love that for every situation, it's like, okay, so how can I make this into lemonade? All right, I went through the situation. How can I help other women who are going through it? I wish I had known ABC. I'm going to tell them right now, right? So I really love Up Notes because it's just this amazing brand that you can use for kids all the way up to seniors. And then for Push to Peace, I think you are going to help so many women transform, evolve, and just become these gorgeous butterflies on their journey. We talked about a lot. Is there any general advice or very specific advice to women who are thinking about divorce, going through divorce, recently divorced, that you would want to share? Like anything that's on your heart or anything that you wish someone had told you when you were going through your process?
So I would say to anyone in any of those situations that I hope that they have, you know, a relationship with God. And if they don't, even if it's, hey, I have a praying grandmother, go back to that person, right? Because I think you're going to need God to help you through the situation, whatever situation you're in. If you're considering divorce, what I always tell people that I end up talking to is it's going to be work either way. You're either going to work on yourself, or you're going to work on your marriage. You know, what type of legacy or impact do you want to have? I am pro marriage. I am not supportive of divorce. So I would encourage the person to try to fight for their marriage, fight for the legacy, the impact that they want to leave for their kids, for their family, right? You know, it's funny because, you know, not to get too specific into the past relationship, but like you still have to interact, especially if you have kids, with the person very closely. So what's your work schedule? When are you traveling? When are you going out of town? Where are you going? Where's my son or my child going to be staying? Like, who's going to be around? Like, honestly, I probably have more details now or ask more questions now than I would have if I was actually still married to the person, right? same nuances that you have, whether you're married or divorced, in parenting, and how men and women or moms and dads parent differently still show up. So a lot of the dynamics and issues that you might be avoiding or, going without, sometimes it's easier to fight. Now, again, to fight for a marriage, it requires two people to fight. I am very clear and logical about that. And so at a certain point, you have to make a call. So, totally support you with that. And I would pray that God gives you the peace in making the call. Because I think for me as a Christian woman, I felt like I was letting God down by not, with God, all things are possible, but this marriage. So I was like, sorry, God, I'm supposed to be a role model to the world, be a light, salt and light. But yeah, so had to get over that. And then if you're, divorcing, have divorced, what I would say is that God kind of just overflow you with love, because I think, like I said, you have felt or you will feel a range of emotions of loneliness, rejection, abandonment, depending on what happened in the relationship, whether abuse, adultery, ghosting, like whatever, like right. Everyone has different situations, but there's going to be some strong emotions that you're going to have to deal with. And so I just pray that God sends his people, his, friends. I would say I've gotten a different set of friends, or a different depth of friendship with people because of this, because people showed up in certain ways that I needed at that time. And so it showed me and caused me to reflect on things differently of what do I need in the different levels of friends that you have, right? And so I think divorce care was huge. So divorce care is a Christian program that most churches offer, not most, churches in different cities offer. So if you go to divorcecare.org, you can find with your zip code the closest program to you. And they also have a program for kids that help kids process through the emotions. And so you are literally, from a Christian perspective, talking about anger, bitterness, resentment, restoration. So all the feelings that you're having, you're able to talk with other people who are in similar situations that understand what you mean. You don't have to sugarcoat it. You don't have to make it look nice. You don't have to worry about who's going to hear, who knows. So that was really therapeutic for me. And then also, counseling, I think is great. There's a lot of, especially now with COVID, free counseling services that are out there. And so that, I think, helped to transform me, also giving me my pseudo counseling certificate. And then the last thing that I would just say to anyone in this situation is to give yourself grace. You can't take too much personally and throughout the journey. You have to give yourself grace in reference to time. You might want to be healed in 6 months, but it's probably not going to happen that fast, right? You might want to be in a new relationship. You could end up in a relationship really fast, but is it the right relationship, right? You might get a new idea, start a business. Are you supposed to start it right now, or is it just the idea? So I think just making sure that you're in lock, tune, and step with God on what and when and how you should be doing it, who you should be doing things with, and just to give yourself grace and know that God loves you. God will never leave you. You'll be very, very comforting to know that he will show his love in so many different ways, whether it's a song, whether it's a friend sending the text at the right moment, whether it's, someone sending you a gift, whatever it might be, whatever your love language is, God knows, and he sends what you need at the moment when you need it. And so that was just one thing that was so surprising and shocking for me, because I knew that, God favored me. I had this, I had that, but I was looking at possessions before, really. And to just kind of see my heart that I hadn't necessarily exposed or shared with anyone, and for a friend to say something that would hit and pierce my heart, or a song to hit when I needed to hear it, like, you can't tell me that God doesn't love me. I'm favored. So, like, come for me if you want to.
No, I love that. So, yeah. I love how you pointed out those, what people would think of as coincidences or the universe. I love how you called it what it is. That's God showing his love, whether it's the bird, coming to your window, or it's the kid coming to you to say, Mommy, I love you. You're the best. Or, like you said, the friend sending the text message. I do think we need those simple reminders that God is thinking about us and he's in everything. So there are no coincidences, right? But one thing you mentioned in the beginning was just the pressure that we take on. My parents got divorced, I believe, when I was 12. And I remember just growing up thinking, I'm going to have the best marriage ever. And my parents got divorced because of a lack of communication. So I'm going to tell my husband everything. And I remember dating these guys, and I would be like, oh, do you know that I stubbed my toe today? And they'll just be like, Okay, thanks for sharing. But for me, it was like I was trying to divorce proof. Like, well, if my parents didn't make it because they didn't communicate enough, I'm gonna tell them everything, right? So I love how you talked about that pressure because I took on that same pressure in terms of I have to do this for my generation. I have to do this for my family. I have to break this generational, whether you want to call it generational curse or generational cycle, whatever you want to call it. But we do take on a lot of this pressure. But I love how you just, take everything back to God and give yourself grace. We are not supposed to heal the whole world, right? Based on our one act. Yes, we can impact a lot of people, we can reach a lot of people, we can help people, but it may not come up in the way that we wanted it to, right? So going back to expectations, when we have all these expectations, it can honestly lead to a lot of disappointments because we don't know if our expectations are in alignment with what God really has in store for us. So I feel like a lot of times we operate from learned memories. Some things are unconscious or subconscious, and we haven't really done the work to know what's going on. But then we do these things, and then we start to realize, oh, that was a childhood trauma that I never thought about or talked about or worked through. So thank you so much for sharing your story. It's so beautiful to watch your journey. It's so beautiful to see how your personality just continues to shine and you just continue to love people and just show up for people. So thank you for sharing who you are as a person. Thank you for just being this amazing, dope human and for sharing your story of resilience.
No, thank you. My pleasure. My pleasure. Hopefully it can help somebody. So yeah.
Yay, thank you.
You're welcome.